The rotors hadn't even cooled when the whispers started. Soldiers leaned on sandbags, trading smirks, their voices sharp enough for her to hear. "That's the one they sent us, with that museum piece." Maya Nix Varela stepped down from the Humvee, her rifle case slung low, the weight of it dragging shadows across the dust. The Che-Tak M200 intervention looked ancient beside the gleaming MK-22s stacked in the armory. To the young, it was a relic. To her, it was scripture. Colonel Elias Rourke watched from the edge of the command tent, arms crossed, expression caught between disbelief and irritation. "They send me a ghost with a bolt action," he muttered. His staff laughed softly, but the unease in their eyes betrayed them. The base was Cop Talon, a forward perch carved into Darvaz Canyon. Surrounded by wind that howled like a predator, here, technology was supposed to reign. Drones circled overhead, sensors spat numbers, and every soldier trusted screens more than instincts. Nix, silent and weathered, looked like she belonged to another war entirely. She said nothing. She simply laid the rifle across a bench, ran a cloth over its barrel with the intimacy of touch that comes only from years of trust. Every motion was deliberate, patient, a ritual. The young marksman, restless and loud, cracked jokes about antiques and legends past their prime. And yet, one by one, their groups on the range began to shift. Shots that had drifted wide started punching tighter clusters. Not because of their aim, but because of the adjustments she suggested and clipped. Quiet words, "Hold an inch higher. Let the wind carry you." By dusk, Sergeant Liam Mercer, Talon's golden shot, was watching her with something other than disdain. He didn't admit it. Not yet, but the question was already planted in his mind. Who was this woman, and why did her presence feel less like an accident and more like inevitability? The answer came hours later, when the sky cracked open with static and a voice broke through comms drone down. Argus pod compromised. Self-destruct armed. The laughter died in an instant, and every skeptical eye turned to the woman they'd just dismissed. She settled into the edges of the base like a shadow, quiet, precise, almost invisible. For days, Maya Nix Varela performed the small, obsessive rituals that kept Cop Talon breathing, signing for bulk ammo, patching targets, resetting the steel plates until their centers bled lead. The work was clean, anonymous. It let her watch without spectacle. Watching was what she did best. Where others read maps, Nix read wind. She would perch at the wire at first light with a pair of binoculars and a leather notebook, and the canyon answered her like an old dialect. Dust devils, mirage seams, the way heat rolled off a particular lip of rock, these were not trivia, but variables. Her pages filled with tiny glyphs and arrows. Inversion at 500 eddy off South Spur. Gust, spike every 37s. To the boys who measured everything by a screen, it looked like superstition. To her, it was math written by weather. The young shooters noticed. Private Duyet Ken Tran and Corporal Lynn Rossi Pham watched from the barracks doorway as Nix tended her rifle. The intervention's long fluted barrel catching late sunlight. Ken's smirk lived somewhere between contempt and curiosity. Rossi studied the rhythm of her cleaning like a student tracing a stroke of calligraphy. "She treats it like a relic," Ken said once, half laughing. "Maybe it is," Rossi answered. Softer, but nobody takes care of relics that aren't worth protecting. Nix never offered instruction. Her role-range safety held her to limits she honored with monastic discipline. When a private fumbled a magazine and swept muzzles downrange, her voice cut the air with such authority that reflex took over before thought did. The soldier's face went white. The movement stopped. The command line returned to its hum. But for a moment, everyone remembered there was a blade beneath the banter. Small, invisible things changed under her watch. Before a qualification run, she walked the entire length of the range and made near-invisible tilts to the target stands an eighth degree here. A fraction of a degree there, compensations for a crosswind the base's automated weather station simply did not see. Scores climbed. Instructors chalked it up to better coaching. Nix smiled the barest of smiles and wrote another mark in her notebook. She did not care for credit. There was another kind of accounting. She carried a memory of a man she once lost because a calculation had been wrong. I owed him a shot. She would think, and keep polishing. Then the radio stuttered and the day shifted. A frantic voice barked about a downed RQ-4B Global Hawk and Argus Pod test bed sitting in Darvaz Canyon. Its belly held a next-gen sensor suite and a data core so sensitive they had built a tremor-activated self-destruct into the casing. Any ground approach within 200 meters would detonate the core. Aerial recovery was impossible. Darvaz's wind tunnels and enemy AA made flight suicide. Inside the command tent, faces drained of color. The giant map blinked the coordinates. Technicians ran ballistic simulations until their machines returned the same flat answer, 0 probability. The distance was brutal, 750 meters. Beyond comfort, beyond most accepted physics in the field. Time of flight, they muttered, would be nearly 5.8 seconds. Drop, drift, inversion layers they stacked like a wall. Panic bled into the room, then something colder, the clinical math of loss. Colonel Elias Rourke slammed his fist on the table and demanded solutions. Around him, the base hummed with fear. Nix listened. She watched the map and then, quietly, closed her notebook. The air seemed to tighten, somewhere in the line between impossibility and necessity. A single choice waited, and it did not care for rank. The briefing had collapsed into equations and hopeless murmurs until someone dragged a diagram onto the projector, a capacitor no larger than a fingernail, glowing red as the failsafe on the Argus pod. Destroy it, and the drone's self-destruct would vaporize everything. Disable it. And the data core lived, all eyes fixed on the map. And then the math followed like a cruel dare. The only viable overwatch lay across Darvaz Canyon. 2,750 meters of open air. Time of flight roughly 5.8 seconds. Drop nearly 90 meters. Wind shear, micro-inversions. Transonic instability, the bullet's death sentence scrawled in advance. Sergeant Liam Mercer. Talon's top sniper and a man who carried himself like his name had already been carved in stone. Broke the silence with a whistle. That's not a shot. That's artillery, he muttered, shaking his head. The Mk-22s that had served them so well were precision scalpels, but scalpels had limits. Simulation screens lit the tent. Spitting verdicts without mercy, 0%. No computer model could reconcile the distance, the load, or the shifting air. And then, in the drone of despair, Maya Nix Varela rose as though she'd been waiting for this moment all along. She hadn't been invited into the planning circle. She came because comms chatter drew her there, but her voice cut across the chaos like steel. Calm, measured, final. I can make that shot. Colonel Elias Rourke's head jerked toward her. His laugh was sharp, almost cruel. You with what? Captain, that antique you keep polishing. Her gaze did not waver. It wasn't bravado, it was knowledge. The intervention on her bench wasn't a relic. It was a 408 Chaytac tuned to her body like a second skeleton. Its barrel hand-lapped, its loads match-grade and known to her like fingerprints. She had measured desert winds with nothing but skin on steel. She had walked air currents like other soldiers walked streets, for the first time in years. Rourke's command voice faltered. Fine. You get one shot, Mercer spots, Rossi and Ken run kit. If you miss, you compromise everything. And if you fail me, Captain, God help you, Nix simply said. Understood. Minutes later, A Humvee clawed its way up switchbacks carved into stone, carrying 3 soldiers who tried not to stare at her silence. Ken drove like the road itself might collapse beneath them. Rossi checked comm so often his fingers blurred, and Nix sat still, eyes scanning every ridge, every glint of rock. She spoke once, pointing at a pale stripe of stone. That shelf bends wind faster than the app will catch. Rossi blinked at her, half skeptical, half reverent. It felt less like advice and more like prophecy. At the ridge, they disembarked into a wind that smelled of iron and scorched dust. The planner's overwatch point was flat, safe, predictable. Nix ignored it. She walked 20 yards to a narrow, uneven ledge where the ground tilted just enough to bite a bipod. She spread a small canvas mat as if laying down a prayer, and one piece at a time, she began to assemble the rifle that others called obsolete. Mercer arrived a few minutes later, skeptical eyes on the woman and the weapon. You really think Nix didn't answer? She just settled prone, cheek to stock, and let the silence answer for her. Every click of the intervention's assembly was a sentence in a language only Nix truly spoke. Bipod locked, wedges leveled. Schmidt and Bender tightened until the glass sat steady against the horizon around her. Rossi and Ken went quiet, their doubt folding into something heavier attention. She lifted the Kestrel weather meter but looked past the numbers, past the flashing red errors. The wind here is a liar, she said, almost gently. She pointed to a shimmer at the canyon spur, left to right up here. But down by that fin of rock, it reverses. 2 rivers colliding. Rossi tracked with the Leica. A faint plume of dust confirmed it. Her software sputtered. Froze. Through exceptions. It can't calculate. It doesn't know what to do with this. Mercer's voice crackled over comms, gruff and disbelieving. Then physics says no. Nix's fingers moved across the turrets, click by click. She rewrote physics into something human. Elevation stacked into the hundreds. Windage slid right, then left, then nudged back a hair to account for drift. Her voice came low. Controlled, hold 2 clicks right for spin. 39 more for the main current. Add 2 for the rebound. Rossi relayed the numbers back to command. In the tent, men stared at screens flashing warnings. No model validates this. Someone whispered. Nix ignored them all. Her world had narrowed, cheek pressed to stock, eye full of reticle, wind brushing her temple. The drone's capacitor gleamed in the scope no larger than a speck of dust. She breathed once, twice, a third time, then squeezed. The Chaytak roared, recoil hammering into her shoulder, and then the canyon fell into silence. 5 seconds. Rossi counted each aloud, every syllable dragging against gravity. At the 6th, a spark bloomed on the Argus fuselage. Through glass and dust, the impossible revealed itself a neat hole where a capacitor had been. A dead LED where destruction once waited. In the command tent, silence rolled like thunder. Screens glowed with proof no one could deny. Mercer's jaw went slack. Colonel Rourke's hand clenched white on the table. On the ridge, Nix rechambered calmly, her face unreadable. To her, this wasn't glory. It was duty. And duty, she knew, was never finished. The capacitor was gone. And with it, the shadow of failure that had suffocated the base. The impossible had been made real not by machines, not by simulations, but by the woman they had written off. Soldiers who once laughed now lowered their eyes. Officers who doubted found themselves reaching for words that no longer existed. Maya Nix Varela had never asked for their respect. She had claimed it one impossible shot at a time when Colonel Elias Rourke stepped forward. His salute was more than protocol. It was the surrender of pride. an admission that some forces live beyond rank instinct, mastery, and a will that refuses to break. His voice, usually sharp as steel, softened as he said, "You proved me wrong, Captain, and I've never been more grateful." Around them, the entire base seemed to exhale, shoulders straightening, as if some long-forgotten truth had just been remembered. Later, when the sun bled behind the jagged peaks and the desert cooled into twilight, Nyx stood alone at the range. No triumph glowed in her eyes, only the calm of someone who carried both victories and ghosts. Legends were not crowns, they were burdens. Yet in that solitude, she found a quiet peace. A young private approached, nerves trembling in his hands as he offered her a dented metal cup of coffee. His voice cracked with sincerity. "Thank you, ma'am, for showing us what's possible." Nyx accepted it with the same silent nod she'd given the colonel. No speeches, no explanations, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than any medal, because in the end, the shot was never just about saving a drone. It was about proving that mastery doesn't shout it, listens, it waits, it endures. And the lesson left behind was simple. True strength isn't the weapon you carry, but the courage to trust yourself when no one else will. The greatest legends are often the ones who never sought to be remembered at all.